she's going to share, which is awesome. So we have, we'll just kind of do a quick introduction. I'm Kim Ketch. I'm a school counselor. I have students with the last names A through K. I'll let Jamie and Mila introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jamie Martell, school counselor with for students with the last names L through Z.
Hi, and I'm Mila Tappan. I am from the Finance Authority of Maine, and I'm going to talk about financial aid.
Awesome. She's our expert. I will say, Jamie and I say this every year. We're experts in our field of the college application process and all those pieces, college admissions, but we are definitely not the FAFSA experts. So thank goodness for people like Mila. And we also have Meredith Lee from the University of Maine, who's not on here, but she is a resource that I think Mila, do you usually mention her as well? So we're going to kind of dig in. If you have questions, feel free to, shout them out or let us know, or you can save them to the end before we switch over to Mila. So Jamie and I are going to go first and just talk about the process of college apps and how that works. And then we'll hand it over to Mila to do the financial aid piece. So all right. For those of you who are first senior parents, it is kind of daunting at times. So it's okay. You'll get through it. Breathe. We'll help you through it. We'll get you through it. Those parents who are veterans can maybe lend a little caring hand to those who are new. But let us know that we're going to guide your students and get them applied to wherever they want to apply to, whether it's a 2-year college or a 4-year college. So all of this kind of remains the same, whether it's a 2 or 4-year college. So the first thing that your students did is attend a senior seminar, or they were in Jamie and I's our concurrent enrollment success class. They got this information in there as well. But I don't want anybody to worry. So if your student, couldn't fit our class into their schedules, that's okay. We do the same thing outside that we do there as well in our class. So they're getting the same information, the same materials, those types of things. So
there were a couple of English classes that couldn't fit us in last week to do the senior seminar, so they have them upcoming this week. So if your student says, no, I haven't done it yet, they're scheduled to, and there'll be a makeup session as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we're going to go over in just a little bit after we kind of go through the process. We're going to show you the senior packet, the senior college packet that we give them and what it consists of. Then you can kind of give them a hard time and push their buttons a little bit, make sure they meet their deadlines. So the first thing that they have is the senior packet where we give you, as the parent or guardian, we give you homework. You have a part of that. The teachers, there's teacher recommendation forms. We'll show you that teachers kind of have a part in that. And then students basically, some of us do like a little mini kind of resume of what they've done and accomplished in their 4 years at the high school, inside and outside of school, because there's a lot of things they do outside too that we want to know about. So this senior packet, the only ones who really see this are Jamie and myself, and we're just getting information so that we can write a really good recommendation letter. There's a lot of students, a lot of parents that I've known for years and kids that I've known for years that I could probably, or in Jamie as well, we could probably not get the packets and still write a pretty good letter. But there's great information on there in their words, in your words, in teachers' words. So we use that all. It's an internal process. None of this physically goes to colleges. We just use it to write their recommendation letter. So most colleges require a counselor recommendation letter, which is why we kind of gather all this information. Typically, community colleges don't require it, but a lot of times we'll end up writing one anyway because scholarships often require a counselor recommendation as well. So a lot of times we'll take our college recommendation letter and just kind of tweak it for those scholarships as well that your students will apply for. So the first deadline for seniors is October 15th. And that's when this senior packet needs to get into Jamie or myself. A lot of kids, I said, come in, like, you know, if we're there, give it to us. If not, give it to Mrs. St. Louis and she'll get it to the right counselor. Because Jamie will write letters for her end of the alphabet. I'll write letters for my end of the alphabet. We kind of go from there. And a lot of times we pick each other's brains. Like if she knows a student really well, or if I know a student really well, we'll kind of help each other out there and give some tidbits as well. The students who are in our success class, our first round, kids who had class with us today, it was due today. So they got that in, and I think tomorrow is the due date. Is it tomorrow, the due date for our other class?
Yeah.
So we'll get those a little bit early for the students in our class. So what we tell kids is kind of how you apply depends on, you know, where you want to apply. And some kids don't know. They're like, I have no clue. I have no idea. That's okay. It's a perfectly good answer. We can help them. We can help them through those pieces. So for instance, if you're applying to a community college, those are awesome applications. They're like, maybe take about 20 minutes to get done, which is like super quick. So kind of just, there's no essay that's required. So kids love that. They're like, all right, sweet. Like, I don't need to write an essay. Sign me up. So that's for any of the community colleges in Maine. If students are applying to, say they want to apply to just say Eastern Maine Community College and the University of Maine in Orono, we're going to tell them, okay, here, we're going to go on their website and there's a button where you can apply right there and you're going to apply directly. So if there's only like one, you know, community college, they're going to apply online. Okay. Four-year college, if they're only going to apply to like say one or two, our advice might be to just go ahead right on that directly onto that website and apply. If they're going to plan on applying to like two or I would even say sometimes two plus four-year colleges, we're going to advise them to use what's called the Common App, the Common Application. And we'll show you that we have a paper that it's online, okay, Common Application. So you'll hear the Common App. That's what they're talking about. The Common App is kind of cool. It takes a little longer. So that's why if they're only going to apply to one school, we wouldn't have kids go through this whole process of doing the Common App. It's not difficult. It's just a little time consuming, but they can do it in bits and then take a break, come back to it. A lot of times they need information from you. For those of you who are in your kiddos are in our success class, we do it right in class. So it's nothing that they need to work on outside. We're going to do it right in class. So the Common App is kind of like a one-stop shop, we like to call it. Basically, you go to a website, you make an account. Please do not do it for them. I had a very sweet mom that was just trying to get her kid that head start, and please don't do that because we had to go back and erase a lot of it because it was done incorrectly. And it was just, just good intentions, but trust us that we'll get them there. The students who aren't in our class will actually do, could somebody mute, please? Oh, somebody muted me. For those of you who have students that aren't in our class, we'll have little sessions, like work sessions, like in the library during coyote time and some other times and we'll make announcements in emails where students can come in and we'll help them through that Common App process. A lot of information, some profile demographic things. They'll ask they'll ask you as parents or guardians some questions about your education. If, what level of education you have. Did you, did you graduate from college? What degree you have, if you have one? What year? So a lot of that's information that they have no idea. Like if I had asked my kid, hey, where did mom? They'd know where I went to college, but they'd have no idea of like what year I had to look to see what year I graduated in because I couldn't remember. I was like, geez, I don't know. So I had to go back and look. So they might ask you some of those questions. There's questions that have to do, there are a couple questions that have to do with some financial things. And one of the reasons for that is there are some colleges that provide waivers, like application fees. They'll waive the fee for certain reasons if those fees are a barrier. Not every college does it, but many do. They put in all their activities that they do, classes that they're taking. So they put all of this information in this application. An essay, they upload an essay, so that's all in there. So they do this one application, and then basically they're adding the colleges they want it sent to. So they can, all right, I want this sent to UMaine and BU and, more and more if they want, however many they want to send to. There is costs sometimes associated with that. So just to let you know. But then they hit, pretty much once that Common App is done, they can just pay the application fee if there is one, and it just sends all that information to the colleges. So it's very nice because it's one application instead of going on, say you apply to 5 different schools, doing 5 different essays and 5 different applications, that can get really overwhelming. So this is kind of neat. So that's why, again, it's kind of, we call it that one-stop shop there. Also, it makes it nice for me and Miss Martell because once they get their piece done, we can upload the transcript and upload their letter of recommendation right to that Common App, and ours will go out to all the schools. So which is really nice. So that's really good. We tell them, be careful with your application. It doesn't hurt to have a second set of eyes on there, and we always offer that to them too. One year I had a very, very bright young man. I think he was second in his class. And he asked me a question. I happened to be over his shoulder and he's showing me, and I'm like, oh, buddy, you may want to spell your name correctly. His fingers just went a little too quick. I'm like, it's not the first impression that you want to send. So just make sure they, proofread it. And we really stress that to them. Make sure it's free of errors, use capital letters, all these things, because these are some, first impressions that you're giving your school. Let's see. So let's pretend we've kind of fast forward a little bit. The Common App is all done. Their essay, they upload their essay. Some schools, I will say, just as a tidbit, have a couple extra questions in there that they might ask specific to their school. They call them like little kind of supplemental essays, but it's not like the Common Application essay in and of itself is up to 650 words. So it doesn't have to be 650. We say probably should be at least 250. We'll talk a little bit more about the college essay in a sec, but the little supplemental ones are pretty short, kind of short answer questions for some of the schools. And again, it's just dependent upon the different colleges. But the Common App is nice because they can also look up really important things like, does it have an application fee? Does this school require SAT scores or not? When is the deadline? So all these kinds of things come up and they're all spelled out. Do they need a teacher recommendation letter? So it's really nice to have it kind of spelled out for them so there's no guessing and they know their deadlines. We talk a lot about deadlines with this process. Fortunately, they're pretty strict with deadlines. So it's not, if you you miss an assignment, like, oh, you hand it in the next day and maybe you get a lower grade. It could be you don't get into that school, or you miss a chance to get into that school, or you miss a chance to get into the major that you want. We had that happen to a young lady. It was heartbreaking. She thought she was submitting something and she did not. So I called on her behalf. It was like an honest mistake. And they're like, thanks for the call, but, she's still accepted into our institution, but she's not accepted because it was it was nursing. So because it was a competitive program, she wasn't accepted into her major. So that was kind of difficult. Still ways to get there, but it just took her a little bit longer to get into the program she wanted. So that was kind of a bummer. So once the kids are all applied, the first thing that they're going to do after that, we like colors, and we'll show you some in the packet. They're going to come to guidance and ask Mrs. St. Louis, who is our administrative assistant writing guidance. They all know her because she's like right there. They're going to ask her for a gold sheet. So the gold sheet really is, number one, is documentation, so we can track where kids have applied and kind of keep an eye on that. But we don't get like a little message that says, hey, Jamie applied to Boston University. We don't get that. So our gold sheet is our indication from the students that, hey, I applied here, like you need to do your part. So that's the indication that we will now upload or send our transcript and send our letter of recommendation. Until that gold sheet is done, we will not send a recommendation letter and we will not send a transcript. That gold sheet must come in first. So for instance, we tell kids, if you apply to 3 schools tonight, the next morning you're going to go to guidance and you're going to put those 3 schools on the gold sheet. If I apply to 2 more schools 2 days later, I'm going to get another gold sheet for Mrs. St. Louis, and I'm going to put those 2 schools on there. So those are kind of some things that we really kind of put the onus on them. So a lot of times if they're like, hey, like I applied to school, but like they still need my transcript, or they said that, we'll say, did you fill out a gold sheet? Oh, geez, no. Well, go fill out a gold sheet, because we're not sending anything until you do your part. I will say it's there's a slightly annoying part that we deal with the whole time, but pretty much as soon as somebody hits submit on an application, sometimes almost instantaneously, the student will receive an email that says, hey, thanks for applying. We're missing your transcript and missing your letter of recommendation. And it's like, well, no kidding, because I just literally submitted my application 30 seconds ago. So there's a lot of cross that happens between them submitting and a school maybe receiving the information and then things getting filtered to the right place. It's hard as parents because it was nice. I'm glad that I went through it as a parent, so I could see like the counselor and the parent side at the same time. So I got to go through it with 2 of my kids. Otherwise I would have been like super annoyed as a parent, like, all right, why hasn't this transcript been sent or whatnot? A lot of times it's sitting there and they haven't downloaded it yet. So it kind of depends also on like who's in the office that day. You know what I mean? If there's like a whole bunch of admissions people that are there and receiving things kind of get processed a little bit quicker. But it also is kind of like tour season for admissions. So they're out visiting visiting high schools and recruiting. So sometimes there's not a lot of people in the office to, take some of these applications in. So the kids get really edgy and understandably, because like Jamie and I might put our applications in on the same day, but she might get an acceptance letter before me. And, the kids chomping at the bit because they're like, okay, like, did I not get accepted? What's going on? Like, do they have everything? Yes, they have everything. Another thing with the Common App that I really like too is it kind of timestamps and dates things. So we know if like a school has downloaded an application or a transcript or a recommendation letter. So we can go on and we can look and we can see that. So we know like, nope, they got your transcript, they downloaded it, so it's on them. We're just waiting on their part. Or we could see if, there were things that were still missing. So that's kind of a bonus of the Common App as well. It has those things that we can see, if students are missing items, or if, the university or college has downloaded things or not, and when they did that. And it's so hard because it's sometimes not instantaneous, like when they hear back. So let's say they're all applied, they do their gold sheet, then it's the waiting game, which is super hard. And sometimes for some schools, it's really quick. For some schools, it's a month. For some of like the Ivy schools, like you won't even hear back until like, early spring. So there's like a certain date that, scores or acceptances are released. So it's kind of a different process for every school. So, if we haven't heard from somebody applied and we haven't heard in like, I don't know, like a month or something, then we can put something out just, to the school. We've done that to be like, hey, just checking on this application. And most oftentimes they're like, yeah, we're all set. We just haven't, we're working on them type of thing. So again, once that's on their end, like, and I would love to be like, let's go, but there's nothing that we can do, nothing you can do as parents. We're just kind of waiting on the college and university to send their acceptance letters in. So the waiting game isn't fun, but when they finally receive an acceptance letter, what they need to do is again, they're going to be visiting us often. So they need to bring their letter, if it's a hard copy, all right, bring their acceptance letter in, and either one of us or Mrs. St. Louis will photocopy it. We'll give them back their original, or the kids can email it to us. That's fine too. Email either, Miss Martell, myself, Mrs. St. Louis, the acceptance letter. Because again, we're tracking all of that. So it's all acceptances. They don't need to know where they're going right now. So I could apply to 5 schools, get 5 acceptance letters, and we want copies of all of those. Later on, eventually they're going to have to let us know, like, hey, I'm going here. And there's a process of kind of accepting their spot at the school. But yeah, as soon as those acceptance letters come in, we tell kids, please don't hang on to them because you don't think you know where you're going. That's absolutely fine. We don't care about that. We just need the acceptance letters so we can start documenting and keeping those things just as kind of backup checks. Did you want to say something, Jamie?
I was going to mention the direct admit. It's not really a great time, but I didn't want to forget that if some of the students have already received an acceptance letter and you're wondering how they got this without even applying, if they've taken an early college class and passed it, a lot of those schools will send a letter out saying that they've been accepted. It's kind of like a preliminary acceptance that you've been accepted into the school, but there's a QR code often at the bottom, or a link, something where the student has to finish applying. So it's a little deceiving because it seems like it's an acceptance letter, and it is, but there's another step. So they need to scan that code. It reduces the amount of things they have to do to apply, though. So they just have to finish the application to be considered for a specific program. There was a few students that participated in a junior transcript review day that we hosted in the spring, and those students received acceptance letters in the mail recently. Those are full acceptance letters because they already had their transcripts reviewed and for a specific program. So if they receive one of those, they're good to go to bring that in and have it copied.
Sorry, James. I got blab and I did number 6, and that was like we were like cutting off. So I get talking. One little thing that I do want to say is if we don't have those senior packets, we won't write a letter of recommendation, and we want to write a great letter of recommendation for your students. So those are really, really important, because as soon as we get those, we actually start writing the letters, because we have our materials that we need. And we tell the kids, if mom and dad or Graham and Gramps or whoever hasn't handed in their piece, still hand in your piece by October 15th. They can email us, if they want to email their part, but we don't want them to be held up if their part is done. So we can kind of start that. So Jamie's going to wrap some things up and talk about the college essay.
Yeah, and I can also show you, I'll share the screen in a second to show you the document we're referencing. Your student got that as part of their senior packet that they can keep, because there's a lot of information we're sharing tonight, just very much the information we share in a senior seminar, and it just kind of captures it all in one document. But so once they've been accepted, they eventually have to decide where they are attending. And once they do, they need to let us know, but so that we can well, primarily because we need to confirm they graduated in the spring. We need to send their final transcript, and we also document it for scholarship purposes and stuff like that. Confirming their spot with where they're attending is very important. Each school's a little different. It's usually tied to money. So a lot of schools want deposits. Maine community colleges in the last few years have gone towards doing a student orientation, like a virtual student orientation. And once you've done those certain steps, then they confirm your spot. But mostly it's indicating that you plan to attend by paying your deposit. And if that's an issue financially, a lot of schools will work with us to verify that there's a financial hardship, and they can waive part of that deposit or all of it. And then speaking of scholarships, we are a very lucky school district in that we have quite a bit of scholarship funds that our scholarship committee can give out. Part of doing that is making sure you let us know where you're going once you decide and what program. But then the other part of scholarships are we encourage students to look for scholarships, to apply for scholarships. That is something that is on them to do. We're here to support that. We give lots of resources. We have a scholarship packet. We post any scholarships we become aware of on the Remind app and on their emails. So we share as much opportunities for scholarships as we become aware of, but there's so much out there. It's just up to them if they're going to invest the time to try to get some free money. If they need help with something specific, if they need a letter of recommendation, we definitely can do that for them. If they get a scholarship that's outside of that they applied for or that they were awarded from some entity, sometimes parents, employers have scholarships and such. We need a copy of that, whether it's forwarding us an email or bringing it in, we can copy it. We need something that verifies what the scholarship is and how much it is. If they want it announced at scholarship and award night for anybody who's attended, that all of the scholarships get read off, including merit scholarships and money that's awarded by the college they're attending. And that's only done because we were told about it. So you have to make sure they're turning in their award letter or their scholarship award letters so that we can announce that, because we can't announce what we don't know. So I'll share my screen real quick and show you the document that hopefully, there we go. So this captures all that we are talking about, the whole processes in the beginning. And then we touch on some other points like the college application essay. We try to do work groups, a couple of them on things like college essay writing, Common App, filling that out in case there are students who aren't in class that really need help with this. Students really get hung up on the essay. It tends to be just a tough thing for them to decide what to write about and is it good enough. And Mrs. Ketch and I can definitely read them. We always encourage them to have a second set of eyes, especially like an English teacher for the actual proofreading and editing. We're great at telling them, is this a topic that admissions would want to see? Is this, where you need to go from here, helping them brainstorm ideas if they need it. If they're using Common App, there's 7 prompts that they can write to. 6 are very specific, and the 7th is pretty much write about anything. If you're using a college's application on their website, they may have a specific prompt. Just always make sure if there is a prompt, you're writing to that prompt. The essay is really just the portion of the application that shows who the individual is. The rest, everything, what you took, your rigor, your grades, that all can be seen. Even the athletics you participated in and the clubs and jobs, and that's all part of their application in a different way. So this is where they become an individual, where they can share something personal about themselves. But this isn't their life's work. There can only be so many words, and it can only be one topic, and it doesn't have to be everything about them. They just can't fit it in. So really just hone in on one thing that makes them who they are, that's very individual, and write about that. This is about sharing, that aspect, their writing style, their personality, and something that they want to share about them. We can definitely help with the things to stay away from. We help students with that. There's some notes in here about things to avoid. You're not telling a chronological story. They should stay away from things that are illegal or overused. Like we do tell them sports tend to be, or the big win tends to be something that gets written about too much. So unless there's a unique situation with something like that, to stay away from that. Sometimes we get asked, like, should there be a title? Yes, it's optional, but if they can come up with a title that adds to their essay, they should do that. But they shouldn't be it's not an assignment, so they shouldn't be putting like a header with their name and date and things that you would do if you were turning in an assignment, because it's attached to their essay. And again, make sure you're really proofreading your essay. Some colleges have gone away from doing essays, especially like the direct admit stuff that we were mentioning, where if they got a letter from taking an early college class that they were already admitted, they may waive the essay portion. And sometimes, as Mrs. Ketch said, sometimes there's multiple essay portions. So it just depends on where you're applying. We really hit on the recommendations for the most part, that this whole process that we're talking about. We're going to show you the sheets that we've given the students next, that really helps us get multiple perspectives to write a well-rounded recommendation letter for them. Almost all colleges want a counselor recommendation. Some colleges want additional recommendation, usually like a teacher recommendation. If that is the case, a student needs to ask a teacher if they'll write a letter of recommendation for them. We use something called the blue sheets that we'll show you, that we give to teachers, for teachers to give us perspective on the student for our letter. Those are internal process only. We stress to the students, the blue sheets are not a teacher letter of recommendation. They stay internal. Deadlines, we already hit on deadlines, but I'm going to say it again because it's super important. Their deadlines are our deadlines, and the colleges, again, are very firm in that. They don't care. So we need to make sure we have the information that we need to do our part in plenty of time to meet the deadline as well. So it's really important for them to know their deadlines and get their stuff submitted and do their gold sheet in time, for at least a week, for us to be able to do a well-rounded recommendation letter. If we get a gold sheet the night before the due date, or deadline, I should say, we will do our best to submit a letter, but if we can get to it, it's going to be a form letter, some pretty basic information about attending school and on track to graduate and GPA, because we put a lot of time into these and we have to write a lot of these. So we just need to make sure that we are given enough notice to hit their deadline as well. We have to submit, if they're using Common App, we submit our recommendation letter directly online. So they have to make sure they invited us. And if they have questions about how they invite us, then we can assist them in that. And then every year we get asked, can I see my letter of recommendation by somebody? And I understand that curiosity. We like to take the opportunity to explain why the answer is no. So when the student applies, it's going to ask them to waive their right to see their letter of recommendation. And we've tested it out here and there. And when a student said no, they don't waive their right, it wouldn't let them proceed. And that could be college specific, but generally they really want the student to waive their right to see their letter, because they want to know they're unbiased. They want to know that it's factual and that we weren't threatened or bribed or anything like that to write the letter, and that it's coming directly from us to the college, and that's often pretty standard with recommendations. But once a student waives their right to see it, we have to professionally and ethically uphold that. So we can't let them or the parent read the letter. And often when they need a scholarship letter of recommendation, that's still the same letter. So the answer would still be no, we can't give it to you directly, but we have ways to either seal it or send it directly to the scholarship that they're applying to. There's lots of ways to do that. But don't worry, there's nothing bad in a recommendation letter. It's their highlight reel. The point of this is to highlight all of their strengths and talents and the great things about them. If we felt like we couldn't do that, we would tell them, but we've never encountered a situation where we didn't have good things to say about a student. Everybody has strengths. So that's what's in the letter. It's where we can highlight, again, their highlight reel is the best way to put it. So never worry about what's in the letter.
All right, standardized testing. We all love this. So standardized testing, there's two major standardized tests that college admissions use typically. The SAT, which is more common, what we actually host at our school, and the ACT. That tends to be a lot of like Midwest and West Coast schools have the ACT. One's not better than the other. The schools take both. Many colleges and universities have gone to what's called test optional, where the SAT scores are not required for admission. So it's always this, like, kids are like, oh, should I take it? Should I send? Should I? The first thing that they need to do is peek to make sure that, especially if they know where they're going to apply, does this school require the SAT? And if so, then yes, they need to get signed up, like if they haven't taken it. We are hosting our SAT, which I always say it's the last one because there's one later, but if we need it for college admissions, we need them to take it in November. So I think it's November 3rd we're hosting, which means that they need to sign up by October 3rd. So Amy Ketch has been sending some emails to the students. If they have trouble and need help signing up, send them our way. They can come see us. We can help them sign up for that. There used to be a lot of other places in the area that host the SAT, but that's really diminished. In a lot of area schools aren't hosting, or they'll only host to their students. So if they don't take it with us, like November 3rd, they may be traveling several hours to a different test site. So, I would look to see if the schools require it. And then, of course, the next question kids ask is, all right, like, well, what's a good SAT score? Is this good? Should I send it when they do take it? And there's no good answer to that. Honestly, you could always I always tell them, like, you can do a quick Google search pretty quickly. Like, what is the average SAT score for, I don't know, BU, for instance. And you'll find a range for it. And if they need help finding and figuring that out, send them our way. So, our answer typically is, if you feel like it's going to benefit you in some way, maybe, as far as admissions or, maybe merit money, then send it. So if you take the SAT and here's the range, and your score, and it's a test optional school, and your score falls under here, I probably wouldn't send it. If it falls in the middle, you can send it. I don't know that would benefit you, being kind of in that range of, like, all right, this is kind of the average. If it's up here above what the average is, I would send it. And if they want to talk about that or have us kind of dig into it a little bit more, we absolutely can. But there's some times that I've been taken by surprise where, like, especially some of the more competitive schools. One year we had a student that scored very high, on the SAT. And my instinct was like, oh yeah, like definitely, like full send this. But instead, I don't know what it was. I called the school, and said, so hypothetically, if a student had this SAT score, because they were test optional, would you recommend sending that? And they said, no. They're like, it's not going to help her. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. They said everybody who applies has that score, has, scores or of that or higher. So it wasn't gonna benefit her. So she ended up, not sending. And she did get in. She got admitted, so that was kind of cool. But so that, again, that standardized test and things up in the air, whether or not to take it. Most schools in Maine typically, except for I can't remember if Bates and Bowdoin are test optional still or not. But like University of Maine system, none of the community colleges, UNE, Hudson, they're test optional. And so they don't base admissions or merit scholarship money on SAT scores. But if you did have like a really decent score, really like a high score, it could possibly knock you into maybe another tier for merit money. It's really school dependent. So that's kind of the spiel there. But like I said, if you can sign up after October 3rd, but there's a late fee that's super obnoxious. We also have some waivers, so we don't want the cost of I think it's right around, is it right around about 60-ish, James? We don't want the cost to be a barrier. So if that's going to be a financial burden, we have some waivers that we can use to help out with that for those students. So let's see. So just getting help, come see us. We tell kids, there's some kids we meet with, once or twice, and there's some kids that we meet with 10, 15 times. When we tell everybody, we will meet with you as much or as little as you need. There's no dumb questions. We'll help you. We'll, calm you down. We'll figure things out. We'll help you with your essay. But we try really hard to have sessions for the Common App, have sessions for the college essay, so we can kind of try to alleviate some stress for students. So we just tell them, come get help. If you have a question and don't understand, and we do these senior seminars, and of course, like, it gets to when they start getting acceptances and they're like, I cannot remember what I do with this. Like, what do I do next? Because we throw a lot, like we're doing tonight. We're throwing a lot of information, at students and at parents. So don't hesitate. I'd say that for the parents too. If you have a question, there's not a dumb question. Please reach out and ask, so we can help you out. We can answer. So here. Can you go one page back? Here's just some kind of information here. So the Common App, again, all students have this page, so they know. But there's just, that's the website. College Board's another great, just resource. College Greenlight, Big Futures, those are really cool things that, like we'll use in our class to just, I have no idea what I want to do or what I want to major in. So there's some neat search things there, and some like personality inventories, things like that they can do. I'm just showing the FAFSA and FAFSA ID, but Mila's going to talk a lot more about that. Our contact information, does that go all the way down, Jane? There's our contact information there. That students have, a lot of times they'll have to use that, like in the Common App, or some scholarships and things like that. But that's our contact info. All right. Thanks, Jane. All right. So this is the actual senior college packet. Okay. This is what all your seniors got and have listened to us. So pretty self-explanatory. We just tell them, put your name on there. Are you using the Common App? Yes, no. I have no idea yet. That's a perfectly okay answer. We have them circle things that apply to them, so we know, like, if they're in any of diplomas of distinction. So, we can make sure that we highlight that. Colleges they might think they're going to apply to, what they maybe think their major is, and deadlines if they know them. And we always tell them, like, it's okay if you have no idea, you can say I have no idea yet, or the college but not necessarily the major. That's fine. It's just kind of an idea. We tell them, like, if you're probably going to apply to colleges that you didn't put on your in your college senior packet, and you might not apply to ones that you did put on. That's fine. It just kind of gives us an idea of where they might be looking. Pretty much the rest of this is just really questions, more kind of personal questions for them to answer. What are your strengths and talents? What activities do you like to do inside and outside of school? What do you like best about yourself, most proud of? Um, is there anything that would be, helpful about me to know about you specifically? It could be anything from, like, I've traveled into all of the states in the United States, or I've traveled to 20 countries. It might be something neat, like fun like that. Or Jamie had one that, like, they could solve a Rubik's cube in like seconds or something. Just kind of a quirky little neat thing about them. The last question, what specific information would you like me to include or explain in your recommendation? That's really kind of getting at, like, if there was, I don't know, maybe a dip in the grades at some point, like say sophomore year, and because there was something, I don't know, maybe traumatic that happened in a student's life, maybe they want me to mention it so I could, kind of explain why those grades dipped down. Maybe a family member was lost, had passed. I don't know, maybe, just anything. Maybe their freshman grades were not good because they came in and they didn't take school seriously, but there's improvement. And I didn't take it seriously when I was a freshman, but now I really buckled down and kind of found my way. So anything to do with that. Maybe somebody's dealing with mental health issues and really struggle their junior year. And they want us to kind of touch on that in our letter to explain that. So if students, we invite students to put stuff there if they want us to share it, but they don't have to share something like that. If that's too personal for them, that's fine. So this is kind of the meat of it right here. This is their kind of tale of high school career. We tell them we don't want anything on there that is previous to high school. We're focused on high school. So we have on there, work experience, athletics, community service, clubs, Key Club, student council, podcast club, robotics, anything that they're involved in. Athletics, were they JV varsity? Did they earn their letter? Did they, I don't know, were they a PVC first team all-star, or were they captain? Those are all things to know. JROTC has like a ton of different, teams on top of just being in JROTC. So are they involved in those? UTC, do they go to UTC? What was their program? What are some training, like UTC has a lot of cool trainings and certifications that kids get there, like note those, put those down. Honors, awards, achievement inside and outside of school. Also athletics can be outside of school. Like there's a ton of kids who do spend a lot of time and a lot of money, right, parents, doing travel teams. And that's a time commitment. So that shows like, a dedication to things outside of the normal athletic, season. So make sure they include those as well. But honors and awards, so are they on the honor roll? Do they, have they got student of the month? Did they earn an academic letter, pins, those types of things? Have they missed 0 days of school? They have like perfect attendance. That's a cool thing to put on there as well. But just any awards, achievements in or outside of school. Students do a lot of stuff outside of school that sometimes we don't even know about until they fill out these papers. So, and we tell them like, if there's more things, because there's only so many lines here, give us an extra, just put it on another piece of paper and staple it to it or write it on the back. And then hobbies and interests, we tell them not to fluff that off, because there's some cool things that kids do too. Their hobbies, and maybe it's reading, maybe it's crocheting, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe dancing. So all of those things, all the hobbies and interests, four wheeling, things like that, hunting, fishing. And then, are you planning on participating in any of these in college? Yes or no, and which ones maybe that you want, because we can kind of talk about that too. This is something that they want to continue. It wasn't like a one-time thing. So
And they don't need to get stressed out about it's on assignment. It's going to Kim or I. So if it's like, oh, I got MVP, does that go under athletics or honors and awards? It doesn't matter. Just put it on there. And they should really be filling it out. And I would suggest they put all this work into that. I would have them take a picture or make a photocopy if they have that option, but take a picture, because a lot of this they might have to enter into, like Common App, they would have to put. And that way they've already sort of done a rough draft for themselves. So it'd be good if they. And then speaking of athletics, it just came to mind, if a student thinks they're going to apply to and hopefully play for a D1 or D2 college, they need to be registered with the NCAA if they haven't already, and they can do that through Mr. Bousquet, because there are certain requirements that they have to make sure and meet, and they are very particular about what academics that they accept and don't accept. So I would have them see Mr. Bousquet sooner rather than later on that. And then the pink sheet, again, we like to label our forms by the color of the paper. So the pink is the parent or guardian or significant adult. If a student doesn't live with their parent, whoever they live with, or if they're not very close to the person they live with, then who, as an adult, are they closest to? That's who we're asking to fill this out. We give them one, but we can give them two if they have a split household and both parents really want to do it, or if there's two significant people, but we need just at least one. And then this is where you can write whatever you want about them. There's this whole other side of your child, your student that we don't know, and this is where you can brag about them and tell us about them. And it doesn't have to be anything set. Just what do you want to share? And sometimes we often get great insight. Sometimes it's so well worded, we even like take a snippet from it. So it is very helpful. If you lose the form, if you don't like writing, if you find a time at work that, oh, I wish I had that form because I could get this done on my lunch break, you can email us, as long as in the subject line or in the email you say who the brag sheet is for, because sometimes parents have different names or their email address doesn't indicate who they are, who their student is. So just if you send it in an email, make sure we know who to attach it to. And then students were given 2 blue sheets. These are to go to teachers. Teachers in our school know what they are. They are to ask a teacher if they'll fill out a blue sheet for them. And it's just 2 teachers' opportunities to give some feedback, kind of like we ask parents to comment about the student, what they know about them, and rate them. We don't include these exact ratings by any means. It's just, again, another perspective to include. And you should really pick a teacher that knows them well, because they've had them recently, or they've had them multiple times, or they've had them as a teacher and a coach or a club mentor or something. The teachers can say no. We don't usually have them say no, but they know what to do with these. If they say yes, the teacher fills them out and turns them in directly to guidance. They don't have to worry about it. A student can bring one to say their coach, their sports coach, or their UTC instructor, or even a boss if they want to. But it's then up to them to explain what the blue sheet is and transport it to and back to us, to that person, because unlike our teachers, they don't have the knowledge of what it is. But that, and so there's a second blue sheet. And then what's not scanned in here is they have one more sheet that's just a reference sheet with a lot of information, like what our GPA scale is, and that we operate on semester, a calendar, and how many students are in their graduating class, just certain facts that they need to have for their application, that we just have a sheet for them to reference. But that is the packet. If there's any questions, again, they have it. They should be filling it out, other than the blue and the pink sheets, and turning it in and they can turn it in bits and pieces, as pieces get done. They don't have to wait until it's all done, but really, we'd like to see it back as soon as it's complete, but by October 15th.
And somebody had asked a question, could you send or share like the first sheet that we were talking about, the college application process sheet? And we can do that. We can have, well, maybe we can give it to Scott. We'll give it to Mr. Gordon, and he can link it into the next parent update. So we can have that for you if you just want to reference it and bug your kids like, hey, you get those blue sheets out yet? Or, did you hand your senior packet in? And they'll love that you have the lingo. So one other plug that I will say is if you have not joined the Senior Remind app, it's class of 2026 Remind app, please do. It will be a nice reference for you because you'll see what your students see as well. We've encouraged our kids in success are on it, and we've put it out and emailed it, and we have flyers up. Mr. Gordon has also sent it out on social media and on the parent update. But the Remind app, like when scholarships come out, we email the student about the scholarships, but we'll also put it on Remind. So if you're as a parent on Remind, you can drive your kid nuts and say, hey, saw this scholarship was, there. Looks like it applies to you. Why don't you apply to it? You'll also see the deadlines on there too. So you can kind of put a bug in their ear when some of the deadlines come around as well. And we'll put other information as it gets, more towards graduation season, a lot of times we'll put updates on there as well. Just, hey, don't forget this is coming up, or this is due, or just some little kind of reminders. Sometimes we'll put reminders on there for some yearbook things that come up to if Mrs. Turner gives them to us. But it's just a great resource.
In the chat, I just shared a little bit of the screenshot of the poster that we put up around the school so that if you want to, you can see how to join. That's by text. You can go on the Remind app and use your email if you don't have unlimited text, or if you don't want it by text, but that is the easiest way to join. It says send a text to 81010. So that would be the phone number that you are texting. And then the at 2026 OTHS, and those are all lowercase because it is case sensitive. That would be the message that you type in, and then you hit send, and Remind would respond to you on how to finish joining. And a lot of the students are in there.
No, go ahead.
No, yeah, just anybody who's in success is definitely in there. And a lot of students have already joined because we posted this in the spring of last year, but you can definitely check to see if your student has.
Just wanted to put a little tidbit out about scholarships too, just while we have everybody. So scholarship, you should not have to pay for a scholarship search. You should not have to pay for a scholarship. So if something is making you pay to have access, stay away from that, okay? You should not have to pay for somebody to give you money. So we're going to give them also, Mrs. St. Louis will kind of tweak it and put together, it's a scholarship packet that we'll announce and hand to the students, probably more climbing, probably sometime this fall, that will have a bunch of scholarships that we've had in the past. A lot of scholarships are online now. And not hard copies, but there's some that are hard copies. Every single student that is going to college will get a scholarship, at least a scholarship. They'll get some money from Old Town High School. But there's a lot with very little effort. There is a lot of money that's sitting there that sometimes we're like, holy moly, somebody applied to these, it's $10,000 sitting here. And, last year's class did pretty well. As far as scholarships, but it can be a full-time job, or it can be they can pick and choose, but we really kind of put that on them. And it's hard for us to we can kind of guide, but it's hard for us to we we can like sitting down and helping a kid with with scholarships is, I don't want to say is, it's not useless. Like if they get stuck or have a specific question, but most of the information is about them. So we don't have that information. But if they get stuck or there's an essay and they want us to like, hey, can you read this over? Absolutely. Love to do that, or to help with like an essay, or can you check this, make sure my I's are dotted and my T's. We absolutely will. A lot of the scholarships will come kind of more after the new year. There's a lot that come out. So again, just I keep your eyes open. We tell kids we'll annoy them with, hey, the scholarship's out. Hey, you put it on remind. They'll get that double duty. But it's always awesome if you guys if you all get it as well and can help them and follow up with them. Lots of money that sometimes sits there. So free money is good money. So did anybody have any like offhanded questions right now? And like I said, feel free. You can always email us anything. So and we'd be happy to answer. It's been a wonderful audience. So we've given a lot of information. So sorry to talk at you for so long, but all right. Well, I think we're going to turn it over to Mila. Mila, do you talk about the CSS profile as well? I couldn't remember.
Very briefly, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to see if you
Absolutely.
mentioned it. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Mila.
All right. Well, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Takes me a second to get it up here. Start the. All righty. Last little click here. All right. Well, it's always great to hear all of this information. I will just tell you that I am long past the point where my kids were in high school and in senior year, but I do remember when that was where we were at, and it does feel a little bit overwhelming, but just know that there are so many people to support you, whether it's on the admissions side or the financial aid side that I'm going to talk about. And so just trying to break things down and make lists and do a little bit at a time, and it will get done and you will get through all of this. So I'm Mila Tappan. I am the Education Affordability Content and Training Manager for the Finance Authority of Maine. And tonight we are going to talk about financial aid. So we're going to talk about what financial aid is. We're going to talk about the steps to getting financial aid. We're going to talk about the types of financial aid, when to expect financial aid offers, what happens when the aid isn't enough, and I'm going to share some resources. So I'm going to jump right in because I know you've already had a lot that you've been thinking about tonight, but I'm going to jump in and just talk about what financial aid is. So financial aid is any money that's available to help pay for higher education, and that's whether it's at a 2-year school or 4-year school or wherever it might be. In general, financial aid breaks into two broad categories, and I did hear this get mentioned tonight. So there's merit-based aid and there's need-based aid. So first of all, merit-based aid is the type of aid that might be awarded to your student based on who they are and what they bring to the table. So for example, when your students apply for admission, at many schools, not all, but at many schools, they have some merit money. And so a part of the process of evaluating the admissions application is to determine not only if the student's going to be admitted, but additionally, if the student might be eligible for any merit aid based on, for example, their GPA in high school. So that is one of the best sources of merit aid. Not all schools offer it, but many schools do. Merit aid might also be athletic money. That's based on nothing to do with the family's financial situation. It's based on the student's abilities and what the school has to offer. Sometimes an individual department at a college might have merit money as well. So our focus tonight is not going to be on merit money, but one of the important things that I wanted to mention and why I did add it to the slide is because I want you to ask schools if they do have merit money available. So if you're going to be at a college fair or you're talking to a college admissions person or anyone from that school, ask them, do you offer merit aid? And if so, how do we apply for it? And a lot of times it's simply completing the admissions application, but it's definitely one of those other sources of financial aid that you want to check into. What our focus is going to be tonight is on need-based financial aid. So need-based financial aid is the financial aid offered by the admissions office, and it is based almost solely on the family's financial situation. So all schools require the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, because that is what they are going to use to determine how much need an individual student has. So the FAFSA is used by all schools to determine eligibility for federal financial aid. It's how the Maine state grant is awarded here in Maine. And most of the schools in Maine also use the FAFSA to determine eligibility for any of their need-based financial aid that is offered through the financial aid office. So we want to be sure that everybody completes the FAFSA. We're going to talk about it in a little bit more detail tonight. Want to be sure you get that FAFSA done. Even if you don't think you'd be eligible for anything, the reality is you don't know unless you apply. It's easier than ever to complete. It's free, and it won't take very long to get done. And even if people are just thinking about scholarships, or know that they want to apply for certain scholarships, we're finding increasingly scholarship organizations are requiring that students file the FAFSA in order to be considered for scholarships. They want to be sure students access all of the money that's available to them. And if students are going to be borrowing any loans at all, and we obviously want to be cautious about borrowing, but if any loan borrowing is required, federal student loans are best. But in order to be considered for a federal student loan, the student does have to file the FAFSA. So you're paying attention to this tonight. You stayed even after they were done talking about the admissions process. So that means you're probably planning to apply for financial aid. So just please be sure that you do, and encourage others to do so as well. So I just want to talk just a little bit about some things to be doing before you're even going to go ahead and file the FAFSA. And one of those is researching schools. I'm sure your students are already thinking about the schools that they might want to apply to, or maybe they haven't, and that's okay too. But as they're starting to research schools, one of the things I want to be sure is that there is some focus on affordability, or that schools are on their list that they theoretically can afford, even if the financial aid isn't great, right? So we want to find those schools that have really good financial aid, and we just want to have a variety of choices available to us once your student starts to receive their financial aid offers. And one of the big things to be aware of is that when we're looking at the cost of schools, we don't want to focus on the sticker price. Almost nobody in Maine pays the sticker price, especially at some of the higher cost schools. Instead, what we want to focus on is the net price. And so the net price is the cost of the school after grants and scholarships. Those are the funds that don't have to be repaid. That's what really matters. So as you're looking at schools and talking with the students about schools, don't automatically cross a school off the list because it's expensive. Sometimes the most expensive schools have the best financial aid, so they actually are more affordable than you might think. One of the things we would love to have you do is to go to each school's website, where they are required to have something called a net price calculator. It's usually on the financial aid page. And what it allows you to do is the opportunity to provide some of your specific information, some of it being, some overview of your financial situation, things like, what was your adjusted gross income. It's going to take your information. The school's going to use their specific information and give you an estimate of what that student might be eligible to receive for their first year. So this is a really important step. It's a good information gathering. I don't want you to make any decisions based on the net price calculator, but it is a good tool to kind of get a sense of, does this school have good financial aid, or do they kind of struggle a bit more with their financial aid? The other thing that's really important to do, and this you can do while you're going to the website and you're checking out the net price calculator, is to research deadlines and forms required. So in the world of financial aid and admissions, as was mentioned tonight, deadlines matter. There are times in our lives where deadlines are just helpful, or keep us on track. Don't really, it's not the end of the world if you miss them. But when it comes to admissions and financial aid, deadlines are a really big deal. So that we want to be sure that your students are meeting those deadlines. Not every school has all of the financial aid that they wish that they had. And so one of the ways to maximize financial aid eligibility is to be sure that you meet any deadlines that exist. So if you go to the school's financial aid page you should be able to find whether or not they have a priority filing deadline. When I say a priority filing deadline, what that means is the school has one, and UMaine, for example, does, is if you meet that deadline, the student is going to be considered for all of the types of aid that are available from the financial aid office. If the student misses that deadline, they'll still be considered for financial aid, but they're basically going to get what's left. So again, to maximize financial aid, make sure you know those priority filing deadlines and that you meet them. Another thing I want you to check out when you're on the school's financial aid page is what financial aid applications are required. So all schools require the FAFSA. That's a given. But there are some schools that require a supplemental application, which was just mentioned, Kim just mentioned it, which is called the CSS profile. And what that is there are schools out there like Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby are the three in Maine that require the CSS profile. There are some schools out there. There are schools that have a lot of financial aid dollars available, and they want to know more about the student than just what's on the FAFSA. The FAFSA has become much easier. There actually are not all that many questions on it. And so some of these schools say, that's fine. But if we're going to award, in some cases, $50,000, $60,000 of financial aid, we want to know more about you. So in Maine, again, it's only Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby that require the CSS profile. The way it works that schools that require the profile is they still have to use the FAFSA to determine eligibility for federal and state financial aid, but then they use the CSS profile to determine eligibility for their institutional money. So if you find that your student is applying to a school that requires the profile, the good news is that's an indication that they have a good amount of financial aid available, or else they wouldn't bother to require the profile. Okay, so go to the school's financial aid page, go to the site and double check whether there's a net price calculator available. And if there is, use it. Check on deadlines to see if they have a priority filing deadline and write that down. And then check on what applications are required. Are they a FAFSA only school, or do you need to do the FAFSA and the CSS profile or some other institutional application? Now, at the very beginning, I kind of blew right by it, but we do have a publication called Pay. And our Pay publication can be found on our publication page, famemaine.com/publications. And there you will find this booklet that has all sorts of information about financial aid. And in the back of it, we have this tracking sheet. So if you wanted to download that, or you can request a paper copy of it, we're happy to send you one. And you can keep track of admissions applications, priority deadlines for the FAFSA, other requirements, getting that all down in one place, whether it be on a piece of paper that's just handwritten or a spreadsheet. That's going to be really important to try to stay organized. It'll take down that stress level of you have everything in one place and know what deadlines you're dealing with. At least that's what I found. All right. The other thing I want to talk about before we talk about the FAFSA specifically is some other things to kind of get ready. And one of those is to save as much as possible. I know your kids are seniors. You might be in a situation where you haven't been able to save at all. It's been hard. It's really difficult. People have a lot of things that they're dealing with, basic, necessities. And so sometimes savings hasn't happened. I want you to know that if you haven't been able to save, it's not too late. Even small amounts of savings can really make a big difference. So even for now, to think about what options exist. In Maine, there's something called NextGen 529. It's one way to save, and there's some matching grants available. Christmas gifts, holiday gifts, birthday gifts, anything that students can do, and parents, if they are able to put some money aside, will indeed make a difference and provide more options, and hopefully keep that down. The other thing, though, on the flip side is if you have been able to save, I want you to know that savings has very little impact on financial aid eligibility. So the good news is if you have saved, you've saved and just given yourself more options without negatively impacting financial aid eligibility in most cases. So feel really good if you have been able to save. There was a little bit of discussion already about scholarships. So same sort of message I want to send is that you only want to use free scholarship searches. Scholarships are important. especially if your student is planning to attend a school that maybe doesn't have as much financial aid as they wish they did. Scholarships are a great way to fill in some of that gap. So we do encourage that. We'd love to have you visit our scholarship page, faymaine.com/scholarships. There you will find a scholarship search. We have about 140 scholarships in our database and are working to grow the number of scholarships in that database. But additionally, we have links to other reputable organizations and scholarship searches. So for example, on that page, you'll see the Maine Community Foundation located in Ellsworth. They manage over 700 scholarships. So I'd love to have you check that out. We also have a scholarship tracker spreadsheet or in Google Docs. It's in either Excel or Google Docs. So there you can gather scholarship information. I think with students kind of dedicating a little bit of time every week, researching those scholarships. It's not time to apply for most of them, but researching them, having a place to document the information. What's the website? What's the name of the scholarship? What's the deadline? What are the requirements? All of that sort of information in one place. And then when it becomes time to apply for scholarships later this year, they've got all that information. They can prioritize based on deadline or amount or whatever is most important to them. And we found that students who do that just a couple of hours, but on a more regular basis. So whether it's an hour every Tuesday, if they can do that and be consistent about it, those are the students we found have had the most success with scholarships. One of the scholarship foundations that I do want to mention specifically is the Worthington Foundation. The Worthington Foundation is located in Rockland, Maine, and they are an amazing foundation. And their goal is to award each year 1,000 scholarships. And these scholarships are only available to Maine's high school seniors who are attending college here in Maine. So we start with about 13,000 high school seniors, and then the number drops in terms of who actually is going to be pursuing higher education and who's going to be pursuing that here in Maine. So those odds get pretty darn good. So I would love to have you learn more about the Worthington Scholarship. Another great thing about the program is it's a renewable scholarship. So it's available not only that first year, but continuing all the way through, assuming students, keep a certain GPA. So for example, the Worthington Scholarship, if students are looking at a 4-year school, is $5,000 per year. So that's $20,000 over the course of 4 years. If a student is going to community college, the scholarship amount is $3,000 per year. But if they go to the community college and they transfer to a 4-year school, they get the $3,000 when they're at community college, but they take that scholarship with them and they can receive it at their 4-year school as well, the upper limit of $5,000 per year. So I'd love to have you visit their website. This is a program that's available to all types of students. It's not just for your straight A students. So it's an amazing program. So please learn more about it. The scholarship will become available on January 1st. So it's one of those I would just want to put in a tracking spreadsheet, knowing that the application won't actually be available until the first of the year, but then the student can jump right on it and get that application completed.
And I that's one because we love the Worthington. That's
Yeah.
one that we'll promote and we'll get out there a million times as well. So it's an amazing scholarship. They're wonderful people.
They are, and it's not just the money. I mean, the money's a huge piece of it, but there's also a lot of support they provide to students, and they actually connect them with someone that can, basically help them as they transition to college and all of that. So it's so much more than just the money, but the money's pretty darn good as well. So now I wanted to transition to specifically talking about the FAFSA, and the step that is needed to get ready for before the FAFSA can be filed is to create a studentaid.gov account. So in a moment, I'm going to talk about who needs an account, but what a studentaid.gov account is simply when an individual goes to studentaid.gov, which is where the FAFSA lives, and sets up an account. They click on create an account, and just like many other websites, they create an account by providing a username and a password. And what they will need is that username and password in order to access the studentaid.gov website including the FAFSA. So this is needed in order to access the FAFSA and then any of the other student-specific information on the studentaid.gov website. This site is also where if the student borrows any federal student loan money, this is where they will sign a promissory note and be able to track their student loan information. So being able to set up this account and get it ready to go, and then maintaining access to this account over the long run is really critical. So students need to set up a studentaid.gov account. Every single student needs to set up their own studentaid.gov account. And one of the things about these accounts is the student does need to, and any individual setting up an account, does need to provide their social security number. So students are going to want to be sure that they have that information accurate and that they don't accidentally miskey in their social or their date of birth or any of the other demographic information. But because it's tied to their social, people can only have one account. And I say this because I am the owner of several Apple accounts because sometimes I forgot how to get into my Apple account. And so I had another email address. So I would set up a new Apple account. This doesn't work with a studentaid.gov account. You can only have one. It's tied to your social. So when individuals create their account, we want them to be really careful about documenting the information associated with it. So writing down the email that they use, writing down their username and their password and their phone number if they connect that to their account as well. Now, I mentioned email address. Everyone has to use an email address when they create their account. For our high school seniors, we recommend that you do not use your high school email address. And that's because what's going to happen to your high school email address next summer after you graduate? Eventually, you're going to lose access to it. So we want people, if they haven't already, to create like a Gmail account or a Yahoo account so that they will have an email account that they will have access to for years to come, before they graduate, after they graduate, through college and beyond. So that's a really good step for a student to take if they haven't done that yet. So every student needs to go ahead and set up their studentaid.gov account at studentaid.gov. Takes about 10 minutes. Easy peasy. Provide some information, answer a few challenge questions. But you do have to do what they call two-step verification. So they will need to be in a location where they have access to their email so they can get a code and put it into the website in order to, finalize their account. Same thing with their cell phone number. So make sure they're at a location that allows them to do that. If students are dependent students, and most students who are seniors in high school are, then at least one of their parents will need to also set up a studentaid.gov account so they can complete the parent section of the FAFSA. So again, most students are dependent students, so we need one parent at least to set up a studentaid.gov account. Both can do it, or multiple parents can do it, but one will need to do that. Now, for you as parents, you may already have a studentaid.gov account. If you have an older student, and you created one when they did their FAFSA, maybe several years ago, you'll use that same information because, again, it's tied to your social security number. So if you've already created one, you will use that same one to finish up this student section of the FAFSA. If you can't remember whether or not you have one, if you go to try to create one, it will tell you if you do. If you've forgotten your username and password, there are ways of retrieving that information. If you don't have older kids, but maybe you have your own federal student loans that you are currently repaying, again, you might have already set up an account to access your federal student loans. It's that same account that you will use to access studentaid.gov to complete your student's portion of the FAFSA. Okay? So if you have any questions about that, let me know. At the end, I will take questions, or you can put them in the chat if there's any confusion about anything I'm saying, or if you want to clarify anything further. So again, you will need a unique email address, and ideally you'll add the cell phone number as well. We do have a handy dandy form here that's available on our website that you can use to keep track of this information. On back is where you can list all of the parent information.
Mila, can I just interject really quickly?
Please.
I did want to let the parents of students who are in Miss Martell and I's success class know that we did this in class. So please don't have your student, if your child is in our success class, please don't create another account. It is done. There was only a couple that had a couple little glitches, but other than that, like we have 2 classes full of kids who are already done. They have that same sheet that Mila had just shown where we had them write down that information. So you feel free to snag that because it has very important information that you will use every single year. So
Exactly. We recommend like taking a picture of it as long as you have your phone secure and so no one can get into your phone, or keeping it where you keep tax documents, because again, it is not just a one-time thing. It's ongoing. So when it is time to go ahead and finish the FAFSA or start the FAFSA, which we're going to talk about in a moment, your student will be completing the 26-27 FAFSA. And I know this doesn't say it because it's not available yet. So the 26-27 FAFSA is the FAFSA that high school seniors need to be completing. This gets a little bit confusing because the FAFSA that you want to complete is for the year that the student needs the financial aid. So students will be graduating, in late May or early June of next year. They're going to be starting college in the fall of 26. So they will be doing a 26-27 FAFSA. And the reason I make such a big deal about this is because the 25-26 FAFSA will still be available. Believe it or not, we have students in college who haven't done their FAFSA yet. It's not a good idea to wait this long, but the 25-26 is still available, but it's the 26-27 that your students are going to want to complete. Now, the FAFSA is free. Don't pay anyone to submit it for you. There's lots of ways of getting free help. We offer free help. You guys at Old Town High School are so lucky. There's someone by the name of Meredith Lee that your school will put you in contact with and provide more information about, that will help you fill out your FAFSA if you would like that one-on-one assistance. So Meredith works with a program. She also works at the University of Maine. We met each other years ago and worked together there. But she's not representing UMaine specifically. She's there as a financial aid person to just help you get through the FAFSA. So many, many sources of free help. Now, the FAFSA does have to be filed every year, so that's why we talk about keeping that login information somewhere safe, because unlike the admissions process, where if the student applies for admissions and loves that school, they don't have to reapply for admission every year. They do have to reapply for financial aid every single year. So just kind of keep that in mind that, the fall is the time to fill out financial aid forms. So this time next year, the student's going to want to think about, ooh, is it time to fill out my FAFSA again, even though I'm already in college. So the 26-27 FAFSA will be available on October 1st. They're doing beta testing right now. Everything's going really, really well, so we're excited about that. We do recommend that people submit early to make sure they meet deadlines. You will find that if schools do have a priority filing deadline, it probably won't be until January or later. But I would love to have you get your FAFSA done in the month of October or early November. Sometimes people wonder, do I have to apply for admission before I can do my financial aid? What order do I do these things in? The reality is you can fill out your FAFSA first, or the student can apply for admission first. You could be doing both at the same time, okay? So you do not need to wait until the student applies for admission before you can fill out your FAFSA. So therefore, I'd love to get these FAFSAs done, like I said, in October, because it's something you can cross off your to-do list and just move on to other things that are a priority. You're going to feel so great when it's out of the way. And I can almost guarantee it that you're going to say, oh my gosh, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. And I'm glad I've just gotten it done. So the 26-27 FAFSA will be using tax information from 2024. So one of the things that makes the FAFSA easier to complete than ever is that your tax information will actually be transferred over from the IRS directly into your FAFSA. So that's why they use tax information that's a little bit older, because they need to use tax information that's already on file. So the most recent year we have on file with the IRS is 24-25. So when you're filling out the FAFSA, both in the student section and in the parent section, you will say that you approve, you consent to having your tax information transferred from the IRS. And so you have to consent to that. But the good news is that information will come over from the IRS. If you have tax information on file, it will be accurate. But the weird thing is you won't see it. It transfers, but it lives behind the scenes because they're really cautious about protecting tax information. So it will live there in the FAFSA, but you won't actually be able to see it. But it's absolutely been a game changer in terms of making the FAFSA easier to complete. So when filling out the FAFSA, most of the time students are going to need to provide parent information on the FAFSA. When students are in high school, usually they don't meet any of the criteria to be considered independent. So, for example, some things that make a student independent are being 24, being married, being a graduate student, meaning being in graduate school or professional school, being in the military, being dishonorably discharged from the military, having a child of their own that they support. So, again, most high school students don't meet that criteria. There are a few occasions, though, where high school seniors are going to be considered independent and not needing to provide any parent information. This may not be applicable to you, any of you here tonight, but I wanted to share this because these are some challenging situations that some students deal with. They may think they can't get through this process, but the reality is it's going to be even easier for them to get through this process because only their information is going to be needed. Some examples of that are students who were in foster care at any time after turning 13. So if you know of anyone that was in foster care at the age of 13 or later, even if they're not currently, they're automatically considered independent and don't need parent information. If students are in the legal guardianship of someone other than their biological parents, so or adoptive parents, let's just say that a student, is their grandparents or their aunt or uncle or older sibling took legal guardianship of them. They went to the court, has to be a court process, but someone else has legal guardianship of them. Those students are actually considered independent and don't need to provide any parent information on the FAFSA. If students have gone through the emancipation process and they are legally emancipated, they're independent and don't need to provide parent information. And then additionally, if students are homeless or at risk of being homeless and are unaccompanied, so they're not in a shelter with their parents, but they are estranged from their parents and on their own and homeless, then those students can be considered independent as well. So if you do know people in this situation, send them our way or talk with someone in the school counseling office because these students can get their FAFSA completed, probably much more easily than anticipated. And we want to be sure that they know that and have access to financial aid. But for everybody else where parent information is required, one of the questions we get asked most often is who is considered the parent when the FAFSA is filed. So if a student's biological or adoptive parents, we use those interchangeably, are married to each other, then it's going to be both parents' information will be on the FAFSA. If they file a joint tax return, only one of them needs to have a studentaid.gov account because one of them can sign in and grant consent to have tax information transferred on behalf of both of them. If parents are living in the same household, but they aren't married, so they can't file a joint tax return, or if parents are in a situation where they file separate tax returns, then what happens is information for both parents is required, just like in the other scenario, but both parents will need to have a studentaid.gov account because both parents are going to need to log in to the FAFSA and provide consent to have their tax information transferred. Okay, so if they file separately or they're not married, so they can't file a joint tax return, then each parent will need to log into the FAFSA and provide that information. Now, what's the case when parents are divorced or maybe they were never married? So we have a situation where parents, let's say, were married, but they've since divorced. And what we have to do first is determine which parent is the parent on the FAFSA. So the parent on the FAFSA is going to be the parent who provided the most financial support to the student in the last 12 months. So if there's two households, we've got to figure out which parent is providing the majority of that financial support. And whichever parent that is the parent who is going to be responsible for filling out the FAFSA. Believe it or not, the other parent doesn't have to do anything with the FAFSA at all. Their information isn't required, they don't need an account, etc. Okay? So step number one, determine, in the case of a divorce, which parent provides the most financial support. That is going to be the parent that is going to complete the FAFSA and therefore will need a studentaid.gov account. There is one more piece to that. If that parent is remarried as of the day the FAFSA is filed, then their spouse's information will also be required. And if they didn't file a joint tax return in 2024, their spouse will also need to have their own studentaid.gov account so they can go in and grant access to their tax information. Okay? This is where we get a lot of questions. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. Okay, you can take yourself off mute if you have a question, because I want to be sure that people feel comfortable with what those, whose information is required. Okay, I'll take questions at the end too if you want to wait. The other thing, so we're going to provide parent information on the FAFSA. One of the things that I want to reassure people about is that asset information has very little impact on the FAFSA. Families who earn less than $60,000 a year typically don't have to provide any asset information, nor do those who receive any sort of means-tested benefits like TANF or SNAP or WIC or housing assistance or main care. So many parents don't have to provide any asset information. If you do have to provide asset information, there's a couple of big things that you don't have to provide on the FAFSA. So for example, the value of your primary residence is excluded from the FAFSA. So you do not have to worry about figuring out what your house is worth, what you paid for it, or anything related to your primary residence. That is an asset that's excluded from the FAFSA. Additionally, any retirement funds that you have sitting out there waiting for you to retire, those are excluded from the FAFSA as well. And then we're back to, for people who might have done a FAFSA in the last 2 years, we're back to the point where if you have a small family-owned business with a fewer than 100 full-time employees, the value of your business is also excluded from the FAFSA, as would be a family farm. So the reality is that for many people, their biggest assets are already excluded from the FAFSA, which is why assets have very little impact. Things that would count: cash, savings, checking. If you had a second property, if you have college savings like a 529, then yes, you would need to list that on the FAFSA. You would list it in the parent section, but just for the student for whom the FAFSA is being completed, not for their siblings. Okay, so assets.
Marla, did you want to wait, or did you want to answer? Somebody put a question in the chat and asked if it was like, what if the situation was like split 50-50?
Yeah, if the situation is 50-50, we almost always get this question, so I was anticipating that we might. Then what I want you to do is I want you to think about things like health insurance. So if parents split custody 50-50, and it has nothing to do with who claims them on the tax return. So let me just be clear that is not a factor at all. If parents are in a situation where they evenly split time with the kiddos, split time with them, and they really do everything they can to have it be as even as possible, oftentimes it's the health insurance that will push families one way or the other. If they're both kind of sharing, the housing and the food and the clothing and those other expenses, if one of them is the one that provides the health insurance, that may put that parent into the bucket of providing the most financial support. So, I want you to, if you can, try to, really parse out who's paying for what, and just do a good estimate of it. No one's going to come and say, show us how you came to that conclusion. As long as there's no red flags, they're going to go with what you say. So just kind of keep that in mind. But if you just can't, if it's exactly 50-50, you just cannot get there, it's then the parent that earns the most money is the parent on the FAFSA. Okay, so I really, really want people to try to figure out which parent provides even just a little bit more. 365 days in the year. Okay, so not an even number of days. So one parent probably does just a little bit more. One of the last things I just want to say about the FAFSA itself is that the FAFSA is a roles-based form. You might have picked up already that I've been talking a little bit about the student section and the parent section. So the way that the FAFSA works, is that there is a section that the student completes and there's a section that the parent completes. It's not one long application anymore. It's 2 segments of an application. So if the student starts the FAFSA, they can start their section and invite their parent to finish their section, or the parent can start the FAFSA. Either way will work, okay? Whoever starts the FAFSA will invite the other party to complete their section of the FAFSA. Let me show you a couple of screenshots because I think this is going to make it more clear what I mean. So if we have a scenario where the student starts the FAFSA, which with the way things are now, this would be my recommendation, is that the student start the FAFSA. They're going to go to studentaid.gov. They're going to log in with their username and password, and then they're going to see a screen like this, and they're going to indicate that they are the student, okay? So the student will log in and indicate that they are the student. They will make their way through the student section of the FAFSA. They'll provide some demographic information, some financial information. They'll list all of the colleges that they want to receive their FAFSA data. And then at the end, if they're considered dependent, they will be asked to invite their parent. New this year, the only thing they have to do to invite their parent is to provide their parent's email address. That's it, which is very different from last year, thank goodness. Okay, so they'll provide their parent's email address, and it will see, they'll confirm that. And then what will happen is their parent will get an email. When their parent gets that email, there will be a code in it, okay? So they will get an email that will have a code in it. They can either click on the link in that email and it will take them to studentaid.gov where the parent will log in with their parent information and enter that code. Or they can just go to studentaid.gov directly. You can kind of see here when you go, it says enter code if you've received an invitation. So the long and the short of it is that if the student starts the FAFSA and invites their parent will get a code and it will live in multiple places. They will use that code to access the FAFSA, and this is what will tie the student section and the parent section of the FAFSA together. Once the last person finishes off the FAFSA, so whether it's the student or the parent who finishes it off, they will sign and submit the FAFSA. So whoever finishes it off first can only sign the FAFSA, but then the second person to come in, whether it's the parent or the student, will not only be able to sign the FAFSA, but they will submit it. Okay? The parent section, the student section, both have gotten so much easier. I bet it won't take most of you more than 15 minutes to do your section of the FAFSA, and some of you might find it's even quicker. Okay, so don't let the FAFSA intimidate you, but again, there's resources to help if you do have any questions about the FAFSA or need some extra assistance. There's a whole bunch of us that can do that for free. Once the FAFSA, hold on, I'm actually going to check on, I noticed a couple of questions, so let me just do this real quick. So I don't want to continue on. Do students have to create their own FAFSA accounts or do they use their student's account? Everyone has to create their own account because it's tied to their individual Social Security number. So for dependent students, the parent, at least one, will need to create their studentaid.gov account. And thank you, Kim, for saying that. But you're correct. There's only one FAFSA. It has a parent section and a student section, which are connected through the invitation process. The secondary property houses a small business. Do we have to claim that as an asset? If the second property is the business, then no. Okay. If the second property has multiple purposes, then it gets a little bit more complicated, and I'd want you to talk with us about that or talk with Meredith about that. But if the second property is just a building that houses the small business, then no, that is excluded as well. Is there a limit to the number of schools it can be sent to? There is, but it's 20 now. So a student can list up to 20 schools on their FAFSA. So there should be plenty of room for all of their schools. I think, there aren't many scenarios where I can imagine the student would want to be applying to more than 20 schools. So plenty of room for all of their schools. And here's the thing, when they fill out their FAFSA, they have to list at least one school. I would encourage them to list all of the schools that are even on their radar, even if they're not sure they're going to apply to them. Go ahead, list them on the FAFSA. There's no downside to doing that. But let's just say that they do their FAFSA, and then after the fact, they think, oh my gosh, there's a school that I didn't know about, but I've heard about it and I'm really excited and I want to apply there. You can go back into the FAFSA, the student can go back into their FAFSA and add additional schools even after the FAFSA has been submitted. So there's, this process has become just so much easier in the recent years. So when your student does submit their FAFSA, or whoever finishes it off will submit the FAFSA, it will go to studentaid.gov, federal student aid, where it will get processed. So the process takes 2 to 3 days, and once the FAFSA has been processed, that information will be sent to the student. So the student will get an email letting them know that their FAFSA has been processed, and they will be encouraged to log back into studentaid.gov. And when they log back into studentaid.gov, they're going to see something called a FAFSA submission summary that is going to provide them with some basic information, let them know, first of all, that it was processed. If everything looks okay, it'll provide answers to the questions that they answered on the FAFSA, except it will not show any income information for either them or their parents. This is where they would go if they wanted to add additional schools. And so it will just provide some basic information about their eligibility. We want to be sure that your student goes in and checks out their FAFSA submission summary once their FAFSA is processed. As a parent, when you log back into studentaid.gov with your information, you'll be able to see that the FAFSA was processed, but you will not be able to see this FAFSA submission summary. Only the student can see this, okay? So we want the student to log in, check out that everything looks okay. And what I want your students to do ideally is to, at that time, print it off as a PDF. So I don't know if you know what I mean, but you know how when you print something, you can print it to paper or you can print it as a PDF, which then just allows you to save that. And so I want people to go ahead and do that because there are scholarship applications out there where they are going to require a copy of this FAFSA submission summary. Just the first page of it. Again, there's no income information on it, but what they need to see is something called the Student Aid Index. So when a student logs back in after their FAFSA has been processed and they're looking at their FAFSA submission summary, it is going to list their Student Aid Index. That's an important number that schools use to determine eligibility for financial aid, and many scholarship organizations use that information as well. So I want them to save it to their computer, make a file with all of their FAFSA related stuff, and then when they apply for the Worthington, because I'm hoping many, many, many of the students will, and the Worthington Foundation asks them for a copy of this, they will have that FAFSA submission summary saved as a PDF, and they will just be able to send that off to the Worthington Foundation or any other scholarship organizations that need that information. If they made a mistake on the FAFSA, they can also correct it, but the FAFSA is kind of a snapshot in time, so you don't go in and update the FAFSA, you just correct any mistakes that you might have made. So don't want anyone stressing about getting the FAFSA done. So let me just kind of go through the rest of this pretty quickly. I'm sure you're all exhausted after a long day and lots of information. But when your students do eventually get their financial aid offers, it will consist of a variety of types of financial aid. The best types of financial aid are grants and scholarships. These are the funds that don't have to be repaid. We call them free money. It might be money that comes from the federal government, like a federal Pell Grant. The maximum federal Pell Grant is $7,395, so it's a substantial amount of money. In Maine, we have something called the Maine State Grant. The only thing students need to do to apply for a Maine State Grant is to fill out their FAFSA before May 1st of their senior year. So they hopefully are getting it done long before that, so they'll automatically be considered for that. If they're eligible, that's another $2,500. And then the schools themselves will determine what financial aid they have available in the form of grants and scholarships. And then there are private sources like the Worthington or the Mitchell scholarships or other things like that. So lots of different types of grants and scholarships, my favorite types of financial aid. Then there's something called work study. Work study works a little bit differently. A student might see on their financial aid offer that they've been offered a lump sum of work study. This is where they can go on campus once school starts. There's an office on campus that can help them to find a job. They'll start working in that job. They'll get paid, every other week based on the number of hours that they work and their rate of pay depending on the job. Probably a lot of you work at UMaine or know people who have, so UMaine has a ton of work study jobs that are available to students. Great program, great way to get connected, great way to earn some money. But what I do want people to know is that work study is not available to help pay that first semester bill. So the bills will come, for example, in July typically. They'll be due in August. But even though there was an award of, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000 of work study, the student doesn't actually get their work study money until they get on campus and start working in their job. Some financial aid offers are really clear about this. Some schools do a great job at explaining this. Other schools don't. So every summer we get people who are a little bit confused because they don't see their work study money on the bill or in reducing the bill, and they didn't expect that. So I just want to right up front, let you know that work study is wonderful for things like, laundry money or gas money or other incidental expenses or saving money for the second semester, but it does not help get that first semester bill paid. And then you'll find that on the vast majority of financial aid offers, the student will be shown that they have eligibility for a federal student loan. This money comes directly from the federal government, very different from any other loans out there. These loans are not credit-based. These loans are given to students because they are matriculated college students who filled out a FAFSA. That's the criteria. So you are not co-signing these loans as parents. The students can get them all on their own. That being said, they are limited though. So because these loans are not credit-based loans, students can only borrow up to $5,500 their first year, $6,500 their second year, and $7,500 in junior and senior year. So they are limited. Any other borrowing that students need to do, and I hope this can be avoided, but if people are looking to borrow any additional money, it is going to need to be through private sources, meaning like a bank. We do have a program here in Maine called the Maine Loan that's administered by FAME. Money comes from the state, but all of these loans are going to require a credit-worthy cosigner. So any money beyond the federal student loan is going to require that credit-worthy cosigner. Another reason why we hope that students will be able to find a school that's a good fit for them academically and socially, but also when it comes to affordability, so that if any borrowing is needed, it can be limited to federal student loans at a maximum. But we do have more information on our website if you want to learn more about federal student loans or other types of loans. Students will eventually get a financial aid offer. This is one of those cases where schools do things a little bit differently. Sometimes schools will send a paper letter that will come in the mail, which is what I wish they would all do. And that's great because you can see that the financial aid offer has been made and you can all look at it together. Other times students, and I mean students and not parents, will get an email notification to let them know that the financial aid offer is available. They will not send the award in an email. What they'll do instead is direct students toward their portal. So schools all have a portal, which is where all of this different types of information exists. You know, at UMaine, it's called Main Street, and so students can log into Main Street. They can see financial aid, they can see business information, they can see their class registration, they can see their transcript. So there are some schools, and it will happen virtually with all schools once the student has been there for a bit, where all of the communication is going to be in the form of an email that's going to direct them to their student portal to learn more. So that over time becomes easier, but again, some schools will do this right from the beginning. So it's super important that students understand that they've got to set up their email accounts with their schools. They've got to learn how to access their portal. They've got to check their email accounts regularly. Parents, I know I dealt with this too. You feel like you just are really not having any idea what's going on sometimes. So it is contingent on your student to stay on top of that. So have that conversation about that. My kids and I just said, anytime you get an email, you need to forward it to me. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I had access to their portals. So that's a discussion that families can have, but I did have access to that so that I could see some of that information as well. Schools will probably not start sending financial aid offers until January. We might have a handful that will get them out in December, but I think in January is where we'll start to see financial aid offers really being sent out. The student does need to be offered admission before the school will send out a financial aid offer. They're only going to send them out to the students who they have admitted. When you get your financial aid offers, I want to be sure that you can understand them. They are confusing in some cases. They all look a little bit different. They all contain different pieces of information. And I just think it's one of those things where it's so important to get an apples to apples comparison of the financial aid offers. So we have a form available. This is what it looks like. It lives on our website. It even does the math for you. But basically what you do is you go in and you put in the tuition and fees and the housing and food or room and board, the bill, what the bill charges are going to be. And you do that for each of the schools. And then you enter in what the grants and scholarships are. Those are the free money. Remember that the money that doesn't have to be repaid. So for each of those schools, what you want to know is what are the direct costs, what we're going to get billed for, minus the grants and scholarships. That's what that school is actually costing you in terms of the bill. You want to do that for school A, for school B, for school C, and so that you can see them all lined up. If I have 3 financial aid offers in front of me, it is almost impossible for me, even having done this for 30 years, to be able to say, oops, that's the school that's the most affordable. I really have to walk through that step of cost, direct cost, minus grants and scholarships, because, sometimes the offer looks great, but it might be a very, very expensive school. So doing this process, whether it's with our worksheet or it's with pen and paper, doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you do it. And I wish everyone would do that. I hope everyone will do that before they make their decision as to where their student will be attending, because sometimes people don't, and then they're a little caught off guard about these costs. So love to have you check out that. We do have sessions in the spring about that. It's another thing Meredith can help with as well. Now, one of the last things I just want to mention is that when you fill out your FAFSA, you might sometimes be feeling like, well, geez, this doesn't tell the school everything I need them to know. You know, they're using 2024 income, and I lost my job, last year. You have to fill out the FAFSA and answer the questions they ask on the FAFSA. But if you have changes, so if you have lost a job or your income has decreased, or there's been a divorce or a separation, or you have really high like medical expenses above and beyond what your insurance is covering, you have multiple kids in school. These are all things that I want you to go back to the financial aid office and talk with them about. And here's the tricky part is you do have to talk to each school. So you file one FAFSA and all schools get that information. But then if there are any changes needed or any updates that you want to provide, you do have to talk to each individual school and they'll make a decision as to what they can take into consideration and what that might mean in terms of the financial aid offers. But I want you to do this if you have anything that needs to be shared. Keep in mind, all they know about you is what's on that FAFSA, and there's not much. So, anything else you want to talk with them and get to know them better and have them get to know you better. And then what happens if the financial aid is not enough? Well, I'm a real fan of what we call the piecemeal approach to paying for higher ed. And basically that's a scenario where you have as many different pieces of funding as possible. Because the more pieces of funding you have, the less you're going to be relying on any one piece of funding. So I think of a pie. So imagine pie at Thanksgiving. My personal favorite is the pumpkin. If I want to cut that pumpkin pie in half and have two pieces, that's awesome. Once a year, I can eat a half of pie if I want to, right? Two big pieces of pie. But when it comes to paying for higher ed, I don't want just two pieces of pie because they're going to be really large pieces. And if one of those pieces is student loans, that's not ideal. So I want to have as many as possible. That's why any amount of savings can be beneficial. Even if it's not a huge piece of that pie, having it be there at all is going to make a difference. So if we have, savings, if we have student savings, if we have parent savings, maybe we have family members that want to contribute as well. We have merit-based aid, we have need-based aid, we have scholarships, we have some federal student loans, maybe depending on your circumstances. You can see how many of all of these pieces coming together is going to make this more manageable. There's also something called tuition payment plans, which can be used to make payments on the bill. It's basically not a loan, so you're not paying interest on this. It's just a plan where you can spread out your payments over a period of months. So think about like with the braces, right? If we had to pay for the braces all in one lump sum, that becomes really challenging. If you can spread it out over a period of months, it just becomes a little bit more manageable. So each school usually has a payment plan option. So check with the school. It might, for example, allow you to make 4 or 5 payments starting in July maybe to pay the fall bill, for example. So check with your school about that, or if you have questions, you can always reach out to me. If you do need to look at other borrowing options, we do have more information on our website. Tax credits can help as well. So if you're paying for some of your child's education out of pocket, that first year, then in subsequent years, when you file your taxes, you may find you get a tax credit. So therefore you pay less in taxes. I didn't do it every year, but some years when I was on top of stuff, I would set aside, I'd go look at our taxes and say, wow, I paid X number of dollars less in taxes than I would have. And I would take that credit amount and I'd put it aside and use it for the next semester's bill. So all of these things coming together is what can make it just a little bit easier to get through this. In that pay publication, we do have some checklists. So again, if you want to go to famemaine.com/publications and download this or order a paper copy, this we think will be a helpful resource. We also have lots of information on our website, videos, tools and calculators, again, our scholarship search, and more. And then last but not least, we would love to stay connected with you. If you would like to, just like you can sign up to get texts from the school, you can sign up to get texts from FAME. It works very much the same way. You just go to 207-707-5001. You put in that phone number and you type you type into your text box FAME, just with no quotes, but just FAME. And they'll ask a few more questions of you, the platform will, just to make sure we get the right content to you. So like your name, whether you're the student or the parent, what year your student is graduating. So we'd love to have you sign up for that. You can also sign up for emails in place of or in addition to, you can do both. If you want to do that, you can go to famemaine.com/join. If you forget everything I said about texting, but you want to text, go to that page and we have information there as well. We think this is really important to sign up to get some sort of communication for us. We just want to make it easier for you. So we've incentivized this. So if you or your student or both of you can do this, sign up to get texts and or emails. We'll automatically enter you into a drawing for a $1,000 scholarship. And we're giving away 3 of those each year. So we'd love to have you do that. We also have a Facebook group called Paying for College for Me. So we'd love to have parents join that. It is just for parents and caregivers. And we also offer free financial aid coaching all year long. You can go to our website and you can sign up for a free 30-minute Zoom appointment, and that can be to talk about planning to pay. It can be filling out the FAFSA, though you guys have Meredith, but we do that. Comparing financial aid offers, discussing how to pay the rest of the bill. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about it with you. So we encourage you to sign up for an appointment if that would be helpful to you. And that is what I had. And I know I went fairly quickly, so we're all going to take a deep breath. Whew, and think about what questions we have. And I'm just looking through the chat here.
And if anybody wants to come off mute and ask, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yeah, so yes, we'd love to have you create your studentaid.gov accounts early. I don't know that this word has made it around yet because this is brand new. The accounts, when you create them, this part is not brand new, have to match with the Social Security Administration. They want to be sure that you're you and protect your identity. So when you create an account, it gets matched with SSA. It used to be that when you created your account, you had to wait for SSA to verify that, which used to take 2 to 3 days. Now SSA is verifying in real time.
Oh, wow.
So I love to have
new.
people get their account set up ahead of time, but push comes to shove and you just haven't had a chance to do it. You're ready to do your FAFSA. First step is you set up your accounts and then you can immediately go and file the FAFSA. So that is new just as of last month.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that, okay. Okay. All right, I think that was all for the financial aid stuff. Questions? Anything that comes to mind for you? I know you've taken in a lot, but just know that we're here for you. I know I speak for your school counselors as well for the duration. So this was just the starting point tonight. So
A lot of information. So it's overwhelming.
I will tell you that we do have this presentation, a version of it. Actually, we did it last spring, but I'm going to do one on Wednesday night too. That we do record, and we have a YouTube page. So if you wanted to listen to this presentation again, or maybe just certain sections of it, like I said, I'll do it Wednesday night. So probably by Thursday or Friday, it'll be out on our YouTube page. So if you have any desire, I'm sure you're just chomping at the bit to listen to me again. But if you did want to, that information can be found on YouTube. And we have all sorts of other videos out there as well. Great. Well, I'll turn it back over to you guys then. And I'm still here, but
all right.
You want to?
So we'll stay on for a couple minutes, just in case people want to, feel free just to, instead of kind of maybe using the chat and this, if people just want to ask questions, that'd be awesome. If not, we appreciate all of you spending 2 hours with us tonight on a Monday night. So, and don't hesitate, please, make sure you send us emails, ask questions. That's what we're here for. And we're here for the kids, even after, like, it's tough. Like, we have a good chunk of kids in our success class, but there's a lot that happens after we finish that class at the semester. So, financial aid awards and comparisons, and we teach them about that, but then when it gets in the spring and they're making decisions, it's like, all right, what the heck was that again? Send them to us and feel free. We can meet with you.